went to for hunting. So, Canada. Who knows Canada? Canada. So here's the US. Canada is right above us. So there's a hunter. He wants to go to Canada. But he wants to go to northern Canada. Very far north. Nobody's there. That part of Canada, very few people. Very few. But there's animals, lots of animals to hunt. So he asks for somebody to teach him where to go. Because he doesn't know, oh, should I go this way, this way? He was afraid he'd get lost and not know where he is. But he wanted to go hunting. So he asked, oh, is there anybody who can take me to northern Canada to go hunting? Finally, he found a man, a Native American man named Defago. That's the man's name. And Defago said he needed money. So he agreed to go with the hunter and teach him where to go and guide him. Okay? So they go out to northern Canada and they camp at a lake. So the characters are the hunter, and Defago. So there's the hunter is one person, and Defago is the second. And they go to northern Canada. And they stop, they camp at a lake. So here's the lake, and here's water. And they set up their tent at the lakeside. So do you guys know what a lake is? Lake is a big body of water. So there's lots of water. But it's not the ocean. So it's not the ocean, but it's smaller, but it's a big body of water. Sometimes small, sometimes little, but sometimes very big. And so they put their tent, their house, their small tent, next to the lake. But in Canada, it is very cold in the winter. Very cold, and lots of snow. So this lake, it's frozen. It's ice. So it's frozen over. You can't go swimming. It's too cold. So they put their tent next to the lake. And then for 3 days, they go hunting. But they find nothing. No animals. It's very strange. Why aren't there any animals near the lake? Why? And so they're hunting and nothing. And they're very, very hungry. So Defago teaches the hunter how to break the ice. So they break the ice, and there's a hole, and then they go fishing. And they catch some fish, and then it's okay. But on the third night of the trip, a storm came, and the wind was terribly fierce. So a storm, and big wind, right? So it's the wind, big wind. As they lay in their tent, so they're inside the tent sleeping. They listen to the wind howling and tearing through the trees, making them whip back and forth. So they're inside their tent and they're laying down and they can hear the wind outside. And it's very scary. So after a while, the hunter said, wow, the wind is so big. What's going on? So he opens the tent and looks out. And he becomes very scared because there's no wind. There's no wind at all. So all the shh, He looks outside. There's no wind. All the trees are still. The water is still. There's no wind. There's no wind. But he can hear it. So he's become scared. What is going on? And as the two of them continued to listen, it sounded to them like the wind was calling Defago's name. Defago, the wind called. Defago. So the wind, they hear the wind is calling Defago's name. Defago, Defago. So can you imagine the wind? And you hear somebody calling your name? Ooh. So the hunter's like, I must be crazy. There's no way the wind can call somebody's name. So he went back inside the tent to go to sleep. But he saw Defago was terrified, very, very scared. What's wrong? The hunter asked. It's nothing, Defago said. Really, the wind is just playing tricks on us, that's all. So Defago, he hears his name being called and he's very scared. But he doesn't want the hunter to know that he is scared. As the night went on, the wind continued to call Defago's name. And it became harder for him to try to explain away that there was no way that they didn't hear what was being said. And all the while, Defago became more tense and more scared. So they're trying to sleep, but they keep hearing, Defago. He hears it again and again and again, but there's no wind. So after a long time, Defago became panicked, and he jumped up. He was trembling as he opened the tent, and the hunter grabbed his arm. What are you doing? The hunter said. You can't leave me here alone. How will I survive? Because Defago is helping the hunter, because the hunter doesn't know where he is. So if there's no Defago, he would be lost. So he's asking Defago where he's going. Suddenly, there was an enormous roar from the wind coming across the lake. The trees began to genuinely shake for the first time that night. Oh, that's okay. Hold on a second then. Your student card. Okay, so the wind is calling Defago's name, and Defago is so scared, he runs away. He runs away, and the hunter is in the tent alone. And the hunter hears outside, Defago says, help, help, my feet are on fire, help me. So he's saying his feet, these are your feet, are on fire. Like barbecued feet. His feet are on fire. And he's screaming, help me, help me. And his voice gets further away and further away. And the hunter is in the tent and he's terrified. He doesn't want to go out. But he could still hear Defago crying, help, help, help. So the next morning, the hunter got up and he followed the tracks that Defago had left in the snow. So it snows, and so the ground has snow, right? Well, if you step into the snow, it leaves a track. So he followed the tracks, and the hunter looked at the tracks, but the tracks became longer and longer and longer, like something had been dragging Defago. And all of a sudden, there were no more tracks, no more footsteps. They were gone, like something had carried him away. And so the hunter quickly went home. He was scared. So he ran through the woods and he went home and he asked people, "Where is Defago? Have you seen Defago? Where is he?" And everybody said, "I don't know. I haven't seen Defago. What happened? I don't see him." And so the hunter searches and searches. 3 weeks later, so 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks later, the hunter goes back to northern Canada to look for Defago. And he puts his tent next to the lake and he lights a fire. So a fire. And so he's sitting by the fire. So there's fire and he's sitting and he's warming his hands and he sees somebody in the darkness coming closer and closer and closer. And the person is wearing a hood, a dark hood. And the hunter says, "Oh, come and sit by my fire. You must be cold." He thinks the person is cold, so he asks him to sit next to the fire. "Oh, get your hands warm, sit by the fire." And he says, "This person seems familiar." He says, "I think I know you." He's like, "Are you Defago?" But the person, the stranger, is silent. He doesn't say anything. And then he asks again, "Who are you? Are you Defago? Defago, what happened?" And the person is silent. And his hood is dark and you can't see his face. And so all of a sudden, he heard the man say, "I saw the Wendigo." The Wendigo, I had written up there, the Wendigo, the Native Americans believe is a monster that comes in the wind. So he says, "I saw the Wendigo. It was Defago." The man in the hood was Defago. And so the hunter reached across and lifted the hood back. But he screamed because there was nobody inside. There was nothing. He opened the hood and there was nothing. Nobody. The hood fell to the ground and there was nobody. So the hunter was so scared he ran away. So people say, the Native Americans say, the Wendigo is a monster that comes in the wind and calls your name and makes you go crazy until you run outside. When you run outside, it grabs you by the shoulders and lifts you up into the sky. But it drags you on the ground. So it dragged Defago on the ground very, very fast. So what happens when two things are fast? Very fast that rub together? Fire. So his body is here, and here's the ground, and he's going fast. The thing is dragging him against the ground. So his body started on fire. And they say the Wendigo lifts you up into the air and then lets you go. So it's a Native American legend called the Wendigo. And when I was very little, somebody taught me this story. And sometimes, if you listen to the wind, when the wind is very loud, you can hear something. You don't know what it is. Sometimes you hear something and what is that? And so the Native Americans believe that it's the